Eala has one of the slowest serves on the entire WTA tour. That is not an insult. That is a fact her own coaches have talked about for years, the one obvious hole in an otherwise complete game. So explain this. That exact serve is the thing Iga Swiatek, a 3-time Grand Slam champion, says broke her down mentally at Wimbledon. Not her forehand, not her movement, not some new trick shot nobody had seen before. Her serve. The slowest part of her entire game just took down one of the most dominant players women's tennis has seen in years, and Swiatek said it herself, out loud, in front of reporters. Think about how strange that is for a second. In tennis, a slow serve is supposed to be a gift. It is supposed to be the easiest ball on the court to attack. Coaches spend years teaching players to punish exactly this kind of serve. So how does the easiest ball to hit turn into the hardest ball to solve? And why would a champion who has faced the fastest, nastiest serves on tour admit that this one got inside her head? Here is what we are actually going to do in the next 20 minutes. We are going to walk through exactly what Swiatek said, break down what actually happened point by point in that match, and then get into the real secret behind this serve, the part almost nobody outside Eala's own team has talked about publicly. Because once you understand it, you will never watch one of her matches the same way again. To understand how a weakness turned into a weapon, you first need to understand what a slow serve actually does to a champion's brain. Here is the match in question, Wimbledon 3rd round. Eala beats defending champion Iga Swiatek, 7-6, 6-2. But the number that matters here is not the score, it is 4. That is how many aces Eala hit in the entire match, 4. In a match against a top 3 player on a fast grass court where big servers usually rack up 10 or more aces without much effort. 4 aces is not a weapon by traditional standards. It is barely a footnote. To understand why that number is so strange, you need to understand how rhythm actually works at the top of professional tennis. Players like Swiatek do not just react to a ball, they anticipate it. Years of facing serves in the 100 to 115 mile an hour range have trained their bodies to read a toss, read a swing, and start moving before the ball even leaves the strings. It is not guesswork. It is pattern recognition built through tens of thousands of repetitions. Think of it like a boxer who has spent his entire career fighting punchers. Fast hands, fast combinations. His whole defense is built around reacting to speed. Now put that same boxer in the ring with someone who throws slow, looping, awkwardly timed punches instead. No speed to read, no familiar rhythm to lock onto. Suddenly, the fighter who has never been knocked out in his career looks lost, off balance, guessing instead of reacting. That is essentially what happened to Swiatek on Saturday. Eala's serve rarely cracks past 90 miles an hour. Against most returners, that would be an invitation to attack. But here is the number that actually tells the real story. Eala won 55% of points on her second serve in that match. 55%. Against a former world number 1 on a surface built for speed, using one of the least intimidating deliveries on tour. That is not survival. That is not lucky bounces. That is a player finding success specifically because her rhythm was unfamiliar, not despite it. And this is exactly why her story matters beyond just tennis nerds who care about serve speed charts. If you have ever felt like the slowest or least impressive person in a room somehow ended up outperforming everyone who looked more talented on paper, you already understand the emotional core of what happened on that court. Sometimes the thing that looks like your biggest disadvantage is actually working in ways nobody else can see yet, and that is exactly the kind of story worth staying for. So, if this is resonating with you already, go ahead and subscribe now, because what we found digging deeper into this serve is even more surprising than the numbers alone. 4 aces should not be enough to rattle a 3-time Grand Slam champion. And yet, by her own admission, it was. Listen to how Swiatek actually described it, because the exact wording matters here. She said she knew exactly how the ball was going to come to her. She knew the speed, she knew the spin, and she still could not return it cleanly. Read that again. She knew everything about the ball in advance, and it still beat her. That is not a technical problem. A technical problem is when you do not understand what is coming. This is something else entirely. This is a psychological problem. And psychological problems do not show up on a stat sheet the way a big serve or a nasty forehand does. So here is the first question worth sitting with. If Swiatek genuinely knew what was coming, why could her body not execute the return the same way it does against literally every other server on tour? Let's look at what actually happened in that first set, because the number here is almost unbelievable. 84 minutes. One single set took 84 minutes to complete, ending in a tiebreak that stretched to 20 points before Eala finally closed it out, 11-9. 20 points in one tiebreak. That is not a short, sharp, sudden death shootout. That is an extended, grinding, nerve-shredding battle where every single point felt like it mattered more than the last. And here is where the numbers get genuinely strange. Over the course of that match, Swiatek committed 44 unforced errors. 44. Eala committed 21. That is more than double. Against a player using one of the least physically threatening serves on tour, a 3-time Grand Slam champion was making mistakes at over twice the rate of her opponent. Second mini question. How does a player with a legitimately weaker serve end up forcing more than double the unforced errors out of one of the most technically sound ball strikers in the world? This is where it stops looking like a fluke and starts looking like something closer to a pattern. Because this was not a one-set anomaly buried inside an otherwise normal match. This was the entire match. Swiatek's own second serve, the one shot that should have been her escape valve, her reset button when things got tight, only won her 32% of points behind it. 32%. Against Eala's 55% on the exact same shot. Third mini question, and this one is the uncomfortable one. If a champion cannot solve a serve she can literally see coming from a mile away, what does that actually say about what tennis at the highest level is built on? Because here is the uncomfortable truth building underneath all of this. We have been trained as fans to think that speed and power are the things that break opponents down. Big serves, big forehands, overwhelming physicality, but everything happening in this match points somewhere completely different. It suggests that rhythm, not raw power, might be the single most important variable in high-level tennis, and that a player who understands how to attack rhythm instead of chasing speed might be doing something far more dangerous than anyone has given her credit for. If that is true, then Eala's serve is not a limitation she has learned to survive with. It might be the exact opposite of what everyone assumes. And once you see what her team has actually been building around this shot, the entire story of how she is beating some of the best players in the world starts to look completely different. Here is the part almost nobody talks about. Eala's serve is not slow because she cannot hit it harder. It is slow because that speed disrupts rhythm better than pure power ever could against certain opponents. What looks like a weakness on paper is actually a weapon built specifically to break timing. Sit with that for a second, because it completely flips the story you have been told up to this point. For years, commentators, analysts, even casual fans watching her matches have framed Eala's serve the exact same way, a hole in her game. The one thing she needs to fix before she can truly compete with the best players in the world. Every broadcast mentions it. Every scouting report flags it. It has been treated as the single biggest obstacle standing between her and elite status. But look at what actually happens on the court, match after match against exactly the players who were supposed to punish that kind of serve the hardest. It does not get punished now. It gets survived. Barely, point after uncomfortable point, by opponents who cannot find their normal rhythm against it. Here is the analogy that makes this click. Think about a pitcher in baseball who suddenly slows a fastball down into an off-speed pitch right when a batter is locked in and timing everything perfectly. The batter is not confused because the pitch is unhittable in theory. A slow, looping pitch should be the easiest thing to crush. But the batter's entire internal clock, built on reacting to speed, gets thrown off by something that arrives at the wrong tempo. Suddenly, a pitch that should be easy becomes the hardest thing to time all night. That is not a weakness in the pitcher's arm. That is a weapon used deliberately at exactly the right moment. Now apply that directly to Eala. She is not accidentally serving slow because she lacks the physical tools for more pace. She has built an entire game around disrupting the internal rhythm that elite returners rely on without even realizing it. Every single one of her opponents has spent years training their bodies to read fast, powerful, predictable deliveries. Eala gives them something their nervous system has almost no experience processing under real pressure. This reframes everything we just walked through in the previous section. That 84-minute first set was not simply a tight, competitive battle between two good players. It was Swiatek's return game slowly, visibly breaking down in real time against a rhythm her body could not adjust to fast enough. Those 44 unforced errors were not random mistakes scattered across the match. They were the direct, measurable result of a serve doing exactly what it was designed to do. What looked like Eala's biggest liability for her entire junior and early professional career might actually be the single most underrated weapon on the entire WTA Tour right now. If that sounds like a bold claim, it is not just theory. The proof is sitting right there in how Eala has performed against the very best players in the world all year long. And if this twist just changed the way you think about her serve, drop a comment right now with what you think her biggest weapon actually is, because what comes next might change your answer completely. So does this actually hold up outside of one match? Look at the record. Eala is 7-4 against top 10 opponents right now. 7 wins against the best players in the world. That is not a fluke sample size anymore. That is a pattern. And patterns in professional sports do not lie the way a single result sometimes can. Here is proof number 1. This was not the first time this exact serve broke Swiatek down. Go back to Miami, March 2025. Eala beat Swiatek there too, 6-2, 7-5, using the same style, the same rhythm disruption, against the same opponent more than a year before Wimbledon. This was not a one-time trick that happened to work under the bright lights of center court. This was a blueprint Eala had already used successfully once before against the exact same player on a completely different surface. Here is proof number 2. Look at her results this entire grass season, the surface where power and speed are supposed to matter most. 9 wins, 3 losses on grass. The surface where big fast serves are supposed to dominate every single match. And yet Eala, using one of the slowest deliveries on tour, went 9-3, including wins over Elena Rybakina and Alina Svitolina, 2 players known specifically for their aggressive, powerful games. If rhythm disruption only worked on slower surfaces, this record should not exist. It does exist, which means the weapon works regardless of surface speed. Here is proof number 3, and this one connects everything back to where we started. Remember the question from the very beginning of this video. How does a slow serve break a champion mentally? Now you have the full answer. It is not about speed at all. It is about denying an opponent the one thing every elite returner depends on without even consciously thinking about it, a predictable rhythm to lock onto. Take that away, and even a player who has spent her entire life reading serves for a living starts guessing instead of reacting. Now, here is something for anyone who has stayed with us this long, because this detail almost never gets mentioned anywhere. Eala and Swiatek were not just opponents meeting for the first time as professionals. Years earlier, both of them trained together at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Spain, which means Swiatek had actually seen this exact rhythm up close on a practice court long before either of them were famous. She had years of advance warning about exactly what this serve does, and she still could not solve it when it mattered most on the biggest stage in the sport. Which brings us to the biggest question of all. If a slow serve can break a Grand Slam champion's mind on center court, even after that champion had already trained alongside it for years, what does that mean for every single player left in her path who has never seen it up close at all? This is bigger than one win over one champion. If a slow serve can genuinely break the rhythm of the best returners in the world, then every player left in this draw now has to prepare for something that will not show up in any scouting report, will not show up on a radar gun, and cannot be practiced away in a single training session. You cannot simulate years of ingrained timing suddenly failing you in real time. You either have an answer for it walking onto the court, or you find out the hard way on live television in front of thousands of people. And that raises a bigger question for the entire WTA Tour, not just for Eala's next opponent. For years, young players have been told the path to the top is more power, more speed, bigger serves, harder hitting. Eala is quietly proving there is another path entirely, one built on disrupting rhythm instead of overwhelming it. If that keeps working at this level, do not be surprised if other players on tour start studying exactly what she is doing instead of just trying to out-hit her. Up next for Eala is Jasmine Paolini in the 4th round, a former Grand Slam finalist and a player Eala has already beaten once this year in Dubai. The question now is simple. Does Paolini's return game handle rhythm disruption any better than a 3-time major champion just did? Or does this pattern continue right through the rest of this tournament? Nobody knows that answer yet. Not the commentators calling the match, not the players still left in the draw, not even Eala's own team, who built this weapon in the first place and are watching it work better than they probably ever expected on the biggest stage in tennis. If you want to see whether this exact serve takes down Paolini next, and whether this really is the tournament where everyone finally starts taking Alex Eala seriously, subscribe now, because we are covering every single round of this run before anyone else does.